Hi there, my name is Trills and welcome back to another video in the Engaging with Art series. Today we are talking about merit, which is kind of an interesting topic to consider because merit is something that's measurable but then hard to measure at the same time. The way that it comes to mind for me, the way that I sort of define it in the context of this conversation and talking about art is something along the lines, I wrote down a subjective measure by which to assess the success of an art object. You might think of that as like, how artful is an art object? It can also be somewhat understood as a measure of the intrinsic value of an art object as being art. These are not dictionary definitions of merit, but it's really more what comes to mind for me and for my understanding, and especially for like our conversation here. For our purposes specifically, I have that it's finding artistic value or pointing to the art within a creation, that artistic merit exists apart from us or our subjective taste. And that is really the main point of this whole video and this discussion today. So that might be a little dense as a preamble for the video, but stick with me because I think that you'll find there's a good reason why I try to set it up on such a place. One thing I want to start with is one of my favorite sayings that I cannot remember where I first heard, so I can't properly attribute it to anybody, but essentially it goes, if you measure a fish's worth by how well it can climb a tree, you will find it very poorly lacking. But if you measure a monkey's worth by how well it can climb a tree, you'll find that it's extremely successful. What is my point behind that? Well, if we judge all art by the same metrics, if we judge all art objects of all different media by the same metrics, we're going to have a problem, and we're always going to have conflicts arise. For example, a book is art, a novel is art, writing is an art form, and then film is art, cinema is an art form. If we were to judge a movie based on how well it is as a book, or if we were to judge, let's say, the success of a movie by the way we would judge a book when it comes to looking at the artistic merit within each, we would have a problem. We have to be open to assess it on its grounds. This can go a step further, however, because consider the notion of realism. If we judge all artwork, fine art, two-dimensional art, paintings, drawings, that sort of thing, even three-dimensional art, of course, too, if we judge all of it based on realism, we would again find that it's very disenfranchising for us, and it would be problematic, and it would be very short-sighted and faulty, because the problem is if we sit down and judge the success of artwork on just how well it can portray realism, then we are sort of using an incorrect measure. That also brings up a good point about how all art is only good depending on how well it is in terms of realism. There's like a false notion, I think, that's grown in society that art is only good if it's realistic, or art is only successful if it's done with technical skill that's very evident on the surface. And my point in bringing this into the conversation, because I think I've mentioned this in the past videos as well, is that if we seek artistic merit within an art object on that yardstick or that measure, that principle alone, we are going to miss the point of a vast amount of art. Because again, art is about the tools that the artist is using to drive towards a certain point. Now, shifting gears a little bit, I want to discuss finding artistic merit. I have mentioned before in previous videos how commercialism affects several different media in art, specifically film, music, video games, that these are major industries with major amounts of money going through them. And as a result, we have other hands in the pot, so to speak, along with the artists and their vision that can mix things up and make it more difficult to understand the artistic intent. As I mentioned previously, we have to look past that and we have to try to find the intent of the artist. If we do look at that when we approach those more commercial avenues, it's going to be sort of like a backwards approach. I think from the outside, it's very easy for us nowadays to see how commercialized, how how much money plays a factor. The commoditization makes these entertainment industries much more present in our faces. We have to, I think, take the extra step to approach it from the backside, approach it from the artist at the heart of it. I think the biggest point I have in bringing this up as well is the fact that I want to emphasize that there is artistic merit in these creations. It's in spite or despite those other factors and those other influences that the artistic merit does still exist. And it's when we find that artistic merit that the experience will begin to unfold for us. I really implore you, as the viewer, to make that one of your goals when you approach these type of media specifically. Make it your goal to seek the artistic merit, as in, how is this successful as art, despite all of the other influences that have come upon it and that have molded it and changed the decisions? Because again, there is artistic intent at the heart, at the core, which means there is artistic merit. This is one of the reasons why, for me personally, I find that video games are an artistic medium that obviously are much more modern. They've only been around for so long, but that there is merit in them, there is worth in them, that there is an experience to be had apart from the entertainment factor, apart from the commercialization, apart from it being a consumable commodity. I think it's becoming more clear up to present day, especially in the past 20 years, when you sit down and look at some of the creations. But I would really argue that, going back to the beginning, there is artistic merit in these creations because there are creators at the helm who are producing what are going to be experiences for individuals. And despite the fact that they have been made into such a major industry that just seems like it's strictly entertainment for commoditization, I always approach it seeking that merit, and I've always found it. Maybe there are a lot of other hands in the pot, but there's still the artist at the heart. I think throughout this series so far, I've been trying to emphasize a lack of subjectivity on the part of the viewer. I've been really trying to encourage you to sort of forego your natural inclination for a moment in order to step more deeply into art and to have a richer experience with it. But when discussing artistic merit, I do want to bring in subjectivity, because the reality is that every viewer is going to have a subjective experience and that experience is valid. It's very important to recognize and allow people to appreciate what they will appreciate. I think a lot of this Engaging with Art series is about trying to encourage viewers to have a better and more informed approach to art, a more open-mindedness. But in saying that, if you go through that process and you come out on the other side and something you're experiencing within a piece still doesn't appeal to you, that's perfectly fine. There's a difference between taking our initial reactions to something, to a particular art piece, art object, versus spending time with an art object, allowing ourselves to have the initial reaction, and then taking time to actually sit with the work and then make a more final and more informed decision at the end. Just like I mentioned with the commercialization and how you need to approach that work differently, I really want that to be your goal. I really want that to be the takeaway from all of this, that you approach art ready to listen to what the art wants to offer. And this all culminates now in a conversation about taste, because I think a lot of what comes down to it at the end of the day is a misunderstanding between artistic merit and individuals' taste. I think the biggest thing to remember here is that a viewer cannot measure artistic merit based on their own taste. Of course, don't get me wrong. Like I just said, subjectivity is natural and it's good for every viewer. They're going to have their own individual experiences. You know, taste is good. It's great that we all have individual tastes when it comes to these sorts of things. But the problem is that we can't let that completely inform how we approach art. Because of the sort of chasm between mainstream culture and contemporary art, I think we've been conditioned as a culture when it comes to viewing fine art, that any art that doesn't appeal to our tastes, any art that doesn't appeal to us, especially, for example, the realism conversation I mentioned earlier, if we see art that's unappealing or doesn't look beautiful initially when we just simply approach it on a surface level, we're sort of conditioned to just associate that with bad art. I think we have these really negative associations that have been grafted onto us by the culture over time that make us predisposed to always judge art's worth, artistic merit, on our own tastes, which is where the problems lie. Again, as I mentioned, engage with art, sit with it, be ready to listen and use these tools to try to understand it better. And then you can decide whether it's for your taste or not. Because there's a large difference between art not being appealing to you, yet still being able to respect and understand it, versus completely writing something off simply because it doesn't appeal to you. Again, I want to stress there's so much validity in your subjective taste. There really is. But I really want to encourage you to maybe even stop using the idea that something is bad art because it doesn't appeal to you. The success of art, again, I believe artistic merit, the success of art as art, should be measured more objectively. We can't just chalk art up as being bad because it's not appealing to us. So where does that leave us at the end of this? What can we do? How can we be better? I think the idea is to be an informed viewer. So as I wrap things up, I want to offer some ideas. I want to offer some tools on like how to reconsider and sort of retool your approach to assessing the merit in art. First off, art is dense. There's a lot to it. Be a viewer that's willing to sit and explore the layers, explore all the richness. This Engaging with Art series has not been very long so far, but already we've had several videos discussing different aspects like context and choices that we already have some things to consider. Another thing is artist statements. Are there words directly from the artist that we can use in order to better inform our understanding of a particular piece, to understand what the artist is doing, and thus to be able to gauge how meritorious that is? It's always important to read an artist statement. And in the case of things like music or film or video games, seek out those interviews. See if you can find direct quotations from the creators. See if you can actually find the words of the creators from their mouths. It's about the work itself or more vague about their practice. See what you can find to help inform your viewing in order to understand the artistic merit there. I think it's always important to consider the artist's track record. What work has come before? What work has come after? See, it's a little bit about context here too, right? Because that's going to help us better understand the artistic merit, because we're going to understand how that particular artist produces, how that particular artist crafts their work. And that will help lead us to understand how this is successful as art in relation to this particular maker. I likewise think it's important to understand an artist's progression. Where are they in the career? Because that is going to inform how much skill they have, how much skill they've developed, where they've come from point A to point B. These are all just tools and things to consider in asking ourselves. And my one last thing I will say when you are seeking out this information about the artist, always err on the side of caution. I think we all know nowadays that the internet is sort of a haven for misinformation. So that's why I say try to seek out direct quotations or direct interviews, of an artist creator talking about their particular piece or project, so that you can better understand that it's coming directly from them. And there are plenty of loud voices on the internet. There are plenty of people who don't take into consideration that their taste is not the end-all be-all, and who will instead spew that taste for all to read, whether they like it or not. And so suddenly your entire view is getting polluted, and then suddenly I'm crying because all of this effort I put into trying to help you to see the beauty and the merit in art goes to the wayside because you're distracted by these other voices that are just louder than mine. I think that about wraps it up for here. I think artistic merit is a bit of a strange topic to cover because, as you can see, it really draws on other factors and it considers a lot of different things. But the important thing to remember here is, what are we measuring art's worth on? Is it on our own taste, or is it on much more objective means once we've actually experienced it? And that's what I encourage you to do, is to use tools that we continue discussing in these videos and use ideas in order to find the merit. Seek the artistic merit because it's there. That's the important thing. Thank you all so much for watching. Please feel free to share this with anybody who might find it worthwhile. And until the next one, take care, everybody.